Whether you're brand new to the hobby of plastic model to RC conversions, or you're looking for a fun project that won't break the bank, today's video might just be what you're looking for. Here's a detailed step-by-step overview and build of this 1/25th scale Trans Am. Hello everyone and welcome! Today's project and video is really aimed for all the beginners out there wanting to get started in this niche of the RC hobby. Some recent videos have attracted a lot of new viewers interested in doing something similar, but perhaps lack some of the knowledge and tools necessary for the more ambitious, and let's be honest, sometimes more temperamental vehicles that I've showcased on this channel. So I wanted to take some time to put together this video here, which I really want to target towards the newer hobbyists and showcase a project that's relatively simple and straightforward that can be used as a guide. I'll be utilizing our most basic and beginner-friendly chassis design, going over every single part that I'm using, and hopefully providing you all with all the necessary information that you'll need to build a car just like I have here. No 3D printing is required for this project, though it is optional for those who prefer to make their own parts. While this project will be a bit more on the basic side and will lack things like a detailed suspension and drivetrain layout, getting to this level of detail isn't something I would necessarily recommend for a novice. Certainly something that you can work towards as you gain more experience, but for the complete beginner, a project like this is going to be a lot more feasible. This here is about as simple as a model to RC conversion gets, but don't think that the simplicity of this project makes it any less enjoyable to build or fun to drive. This tiny Trans Am has plenty of pep, and you can race it around in the comfort of your living room. So with all that said, let's get started. I want to quickly start by talking about some of the tools and skills that will be required. While this project is intended for inexperienced builders, at least some prior experience with RC vehicles or plastic model kits is recommended. We're certainly not into the realm of designing and 3D printing custom parts, scratch building with styrene, or soldering tiny magnet wire, but some simple soldering, metal cutting, and altering the plastic model kit to fit is required. By plastic model to RC conversion standards, this is about as simple as it gets, but it might not necessarily be the easiest RC vehicle to build. Keep in mind the relatively small size of the parts and hardware that this chassis uses. Some simple soldering is required, so make sure you have a soldering iron, and for the best final appearance, you'll also need to snip some M2 hardware. I usually just use a rotary tool to slice right through them like butter, but I'm sure you can use some sort of pliers or bolt cutters as well. Other required tools include some small size crosshead screwdrivers, a standard RC wheel wrench with an opening sized for M2 nuts, and some super glue should be plenty strong for a small scale car like this. With those tools on hand, in addition to whatever else you like to use when you're building a plastic model kit, you should be good to go. Be careful and take your time, and in the end you should wind up with a great looking and driving model. Here's a look at all the items that I'll be using for this project. Let's start by having a closer look at the chassis. This here is a kit that we sell on our website, which includes just about every part that you'll need to complete your build. This is our FP UC1 design, a simple, durable, and adjustable chassis that I've used for many projects prior. While this particular kit is designed to be used with specific AMT Corvette model kits, the out-of-the-box 99mm wheelbase and approximately 70mm width can be adjusted. The wheelbase can be extended to about 113mm, and the width can be easily increased or decreased slightly depending on how far you space the wheels out and what wheels you're using. If you want even more flexibility, this kit here includes many different size FP UC1 chassis pieces to fit a wide variety of 1/24th and 1/25th scale plastic model kits. You also have the option of 3D printing these parts yourself, as we have the STL files available on our Patreon, with all of the non-3D printable parts available as standalone kits. Simply 3D print the parts that best fit your project. As you can see, this chassis kit comes partially assembled, so there aren't as many tiny parts and pieces of hardware to deal with, making it a great option for a simple project like this. Of course, you'll find all the links below in the description. Next, I want to briefly talk about the wheels that I chose. When you're ordering this chassis kit, you'll have the choice to include the wheels that you see here on this Corvette, or you can order the chassis without wheels. Some hobbyists might choose to use the wheels and tires included with the plastic model kit, but we do have some wheel and tire options available on our site, such as this set that you see here. These are FDM 3D printed at a short layer height to try and strike a nice balance of detail, durability, and affordability. The tires are soft molded silicone. You can also 3D print your own set if you'd like, as we have many options available, including these here on our Patreon. Link as always is below in the description. We have a few different designs available currently on our site, with plans to expand the selection over time. If there's a specific design you'd like to see us make, we're always open to suggestions. These here are somewhat reminiscent of Pontiac's Rally 2 wheels, so they should pair nicely with this Firebird body, especially after I apply some paint. Not quite as detailed as the wheels and tires you might find included in a plastic model kit, however the advantage of these wheels here is that they're super easy to install. They're sized to fit these nylon hex nuts on the axles, and then you can just install an M2 nut to hold the wheel in place. This is in contrast to the custom work that's usually required to modify the wheels included in a model kit to fit the chassis. That said though, the additional effort can produce some nice looking results, and it's something that I've done for a number of prior projects that I've showcased here on the channel. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do it, but choosing one of our wheel designs like I have here is going to be the easiest solution to getting this chassis rolling. So with the wheels picked out, let's move on to the body. While this FP UC1 chassis kit that I chose comes out of the box ready to perfectly fit a selection of Corvette model kits, as you can see there is some adjustability, allowing this chassis to fit other bodies such as this AMT Trans Am. This body may look familiar to regular viewers of this channel, as I used this older pre-painted model kit for a prior project. I modified the included chassis piece and installed a relatively large brushless motor with plenty of power, which was sent to a very scale-looking live axle rear end with leaf springs. A very unique combination to say the least. And as fun and quirky as that project was, I decided to part this vehicle out, with the Trans Am body now going onto this much more sensible and durable FP UC1 chassis. Some of the other parts will be making their way onto other projects as well. As you can see, this 1/25th scale body is just about the same width as the Corvette. I just needed to extend the wheelbase to right around 109mm. Here's the exact position I placed the rear mount in if you're using the same body with this chassis. It's one outer hole forward from the rear. If you're using a larger size body, you'll either need to order or 3D print a larger size chassis piece that can be adjusted to fit longer wheelbase bodies. For this Trans Am though, all I needed to do was move this rear piece back. Obviously, the body that you choose and how you want to paint it is entirely up to you. That's really the fun part of this project. You're basically building a model kit, but in the end you'll be able to drive it. There are going to have to be some deviations from the instructions, and some parts from the model kits are going to go unused. When it comes to modifying a body to fit and getting everything mounted, that's really where you need to exercise your skills as a model builder, as some custom work will be required, not only to make everything work, but also look as good as possible. If you're looking for ideas, specific techniques, and inspiration, there should be no shortage of it on this channel, as I've showcased many different model to RC projects over the years. Some of these cars have full interiors, shallow interiors, or even engine bays. I've mounted some bodies with Velcro and some with magnets. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. After all, the body is basically just decoration, but it is important to ensure that it isn't interfering with any of the mechanics on the chassis, especially around the steering. You may find that some material needs to be removed around the front wheel arches to ensure the wheels have enough room to steer. I'll showcase the process of mounting this Trans Am body a little later in this video. We get a lot of questions about whether or not metal die-cast bodies will work. It may technically be possible, but it's not recommended. They're just far too heavy. These chassis are designed to be used with lightweight plastic model bodies, so that's what I would recommend using. This particular Trans Am body that I have here comes from an older AMT Pro Shop kit, which includes a fully painted body. It's not bad looking, especially after I added a few details, but these older kits might be hard to find at a decent price, so if you're looking for something a little more reasonable and want the experience of painting all of the parts yourself, this model kit here is a recent release and uses the exact same parts as the pre-painted Pro Shop kit. With this newer release, you'll be able to build the body yourself, doing any necessary finishing work to get the best possible appearance and paint the car however you want. I'm currently building up one of these kits, which I'll be showcasing in detail in an upcoming video, so be sure to stay tuned to see more on that. But I'm sure there are no shortage of different bodies that will fit, as long as it's about 70mm in width and a wheelbase of around 99 to 113mm. Otherwise, like I said, we do have some other size parts available, just not included with this particular kit. You may have noticed this custom 3D printed interior and driver figure that I have for this body. The STL file, of course, can be found on our Patreon if you'd like to 3D print your own interior, which fits this AMT Trans Am body pretty nicely. Otherwise, you can always modify an interior included with a plastic model kit by essentially cutting out the floor and creating a much shallower interior with a piece of styrene, a process which I've showcased numerous times here on this channel. Generally, the deeper the interior, the better, but I think just about anything is better than nothing. If you'd rather maximize the space on the chassis and make your project even easier, you can always just black out the windows with paint and not have an interior at all. Something that I think is worth pointing out is that the FP UC1 chassis sits very low, a lot like a race car. This isn't at all a problem or anything that would look out of place if you're building a race car, but when you're building something like this Trans Am and having it be more of a stock or slightly lowered ride height, the bottom of the chassis is going to be visible. This low floor is nice for increasing the amount of room that you have to put the electronics under the interior, but this edge of the chassis being visible isn't exactly ideal. You can hide it more by painting it matte black, or you can get creative like I did here by adding a set of side pipes to cover this part of the chassis. A little creativity can really enhance the appearance of any RC vehicle. That said, just something to be aware of, and I felt it was worth pointing out. Whether this is a deal breaker or not is something to consider. Also, while I'm not doing it for this project, I highly recommend getting your body mounted and fitting properly onto the chassis before you start doing any painting. In general, if you find that any sanding or trimming is required to get everything to fit properly, it's usually better to do this before the paint has been applied, but it's not like mounting an already painted and detailed body is destined for failure. You just have to be a lot more careful. But whatever you're building, have fun with it. Let's move on to talking now about the remaining components that we'll need to complete this project. While the chassis kit includes just about every component that you'll need to complete your vehicle, in addition to whatever body you'd like to use, you'll also need to provide your own transmitter, receiver, and battery. There are many different options available on the market that can be used. The important thing is to ensure that you're choosing a small enough receiver and battery to fit in your vehicle. If you've been following this channel for a while now, you may recall seeing some of these super tiny components that I've used for some prior projects. These electronics are very easy to hide, making them ideal for these very lifelike builds, but they're not so easy to solder together. So unlike those projects, with this one here, the only soldering required will be to simply secure each wire to the motor. Everything else just needs to be plugged in, and it's good to go. As I've done for some prior projects, for this car here, I decided to use a Radiolink R4 FGM receiver, which I'll be pairing to my Radiolink RC6GS transmitter. This receiver is pretty small, making it easy to fit onto the chassis. It also features a built-in adjustable gyro, which is pretty cool. The included ESC has a JST plug and is compatible with 2S LiPo batteries, so this relatively small size 300 mAh battery I have here will work great. A 300 mAh battery will provide a pretty decent runtime, generally of at least about 20 to 30 minutes, especially considering these little N20 motors don't use that much power. Choosing a higher milliamp hour rating will increase the runtime, but generally the battery will also be larger. Whether you want to favor a smaller footprint or longer runtime is completely up to you. When ordering a battery, pay close attention to the physical dimensions and ensure that you'll be able to fit it into your vehicle. You will need a compatible LiPo battery charger if you don't already have one. Also, when using the battery, be sure to monitor the voltage to ensure it doesn't drop below about 7.4 volts. Otherwise, the lifespan of the battery can be greatly decreased, or it can be damaged to the point of no longer being usable. Be sure to read and follow any operation and safety instructions provided by the manufacturer. But with the battery, transmitter, and receiver acquired, along with this nice looking Trans Am body, I've got everything I need to build a great looking RC model. So now that you know each and every part that I'm using, it's finally time to start putting this car together. The build process should be pretty easy, especially since this chassis here comes already partially assembled. This cuts down on the time needed to put the chassis together, and there's less bags of tiny parts and hardware to deal with. Of course, probably one of the most important things to keep in mind is this kit includes some pretty small M1.6 hardware. This is smaller than just about any hardware you're going to be dealing with on a typical 1/10 scale RC vehicle, and possibly even smaller than a lot of the hardware used on more mainstream 1/24 scale platforms, such as an SCX24. It might seem obvious, but be sure that you're comfortable working with smaller size hardware if you're interested in doing a project like this. As I've already made a detailed step-by-step assembly tutorial for this chassis, I'm not going to go into that much detail here in this video as far as the basic assembly of a FP UC1 chassis. If you have one of these kits and you want a step-by-step video tutorial to build along with, I'll be sure to put the link to that video below in the description. We should also have it posted on the product page on our website. That said, I will be going into detail on all the changes I made specifically for this Trans Am build. When putting together the front, I added some nylon hex mounts to the axles to space out the front wheels. I don't want the wheels to be tucked too far inside or be sticking out beyond the fenders. After getting the rear wheels mounted, I moved this motor and axle mount piece back until the wheelbase matched the body. Here's exactly where I positioned this piece to fit this approximately 109mm wheelbase body. If you're doing a build with the same body as I'm using, I think you'll find this to be the best spot to position this piece, but you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to getting the wheelbase dialed in. Already the chassis is looking like a really good fit. Something I wanted to do at this point was carefully remove some of the excess threads on the front axles. I don't like the look of the axles sticking out relatively far beyond the wheel, so I used a rotary tool to slice off the excess. It's a lot better if you actually remove the threaded axle from the steering knuckle to cut off the excess, but I'm just being lazy here and doing it while they're installed on the chassis. I hope you'll forgive this little do as I say, not as I do moment, but here you can see the results of this excess length being removed. A minor thing, sure, but I much prefer how this looks. At this point, the chassis is all together, and the only thing needed to get it up and running is adding the electronics, which I'll be covering that process in just a minute. First though, I want to go ahead and secure the body to the chassis. Like I said before, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do this, but the method I'll be using here is one that I've showcased many times, and that's using the included posts and magnets. The process is pretty simple. First, I glued the posts onto the chassis. Ideally, I'll place them underneath a flat portion on the underside of the body, so there will be a nice mounting surface for the magnets. 4 posts are included, but 3 will be enough to securely hold the body in place. Once the posts are secured to the chassis, I cut them down so the body won't be positioned too high. Once the body is sitting at the height that I want, I needed to remove an additional approximately 4mm to account for the height of the 2 magnets, which will be placed on top of each post. Take your time and ensure the body is positioned at the height that you want and it's level from side to side and front to back. Usually I like to lean on the side of making the posts a little lower than I think I might need, because I can always just add some additional magnets or small pieces of scrap plastic to act as shims to increase the height of the body. Once all the posts are cut to the correct height, I can glue the magnets into place. 1 magnet goes on the top of each post and 1 on the underside of the body. Of course, be sure that you align the body correctly with all the wheels in the center of the arches before letting the glue dry. After that, the magnet should securely hold the body in place, but still allow it to be easily removed. At this point, I can move on to getting all of the electronics connected and installed. The setup is very simple. The 3-wire connector on the steering servo goes into channel 1 and the ESC into channel 2 on the receiver. Make sure that you have each plug oriented correctly. There should be a diagram either on the receiver or in an included manual. The 2S LiPo battery will be connected to the female JST plug on the ESC, with the other male JST connector going to the motor. Connecting these electronics together is very easy. Just plug everything in, with the only soldering required being to add the standalone female JST connector to the motor. Now, getting all of these electronics to fit under the body and be as compact and tidy as possible, now that's a bit more difficult, especially if you're wanting to include a more detailed interior or engine bay. Using smaller size electronics will be ideal if you're doing a more detailed build, but these here are not just plug and play, instead requiring some fairly precise soldering. They're a great option, but do require a bit more work. Thanks to some strategic placement and some small size zip ties, I've got everything looking pretty good, with no worries about any of the wires getting caught up in the steering linkage or gears. I like to use a small piece of Velcro to secure the battery while driving. At this point, I'll go ahead and power on the car to ensure everything works correctly. If you need to reverse either the direction of the steering servo or throttle, this should be easy to do either by flipping a switch or going into the settings menu of your transmitter. You'll also either want to reduce the dual rate or set endpoints for the steering servo so it's not trying to move beyond the physical limits of the steering, which can cause damage. This is very easy to do with the RC6GS. Just enter the menu, and from here you can find either the endpoint adjustment or dual rate adjustment from the list. Many other transmitters should be similar, but for more information about these settings, consult the manual for your specific transmitter. Alright, so the chassis is put together, the body is mounted, and it's alive. A successful but not quite finished model to RC conversion. There's still a few things I want to do to make this car look a bit better. First, I want to go ahead and get these wheels painted. I cleaned them up and then applied some silver paint. Once the silver dried, I applied some watered down black acrylic paint by hand to the lower sections of the wheel, with this being the result. For a simple FDM print, with a little paint, they look great. Like I talked about before, with this FP UC1 chassis sitting so low, the appearance on this particular car isn't exactly ideal. I thought I'd try sourcing a couple of side pipes from some leftovers of an older Chevelle kit. I just glued them to each side of the chassis, and I'm really happy with how they look on this car. A bit of period correct flare, and they do a great job of hiding the chassis. One final detail that I thought I'd add was, once again using a black wash, I wanted to try to accentuate the panel lines. Some of the panel lines are quite shallow and faint, making this process a bit more difficult, but I think it does help add a bit more detail. With that done, this Trans Am is complete, and for such a simple project and using a pre-painted body, I think it looks pretty good. A cool looking car, but now it's time to do some driving. After the hours of work building a car, it's always fun to finally be able to drive it. I've built many vehicles on this exact platform, but it's still a lot of fun seeing this Trans Am cruising around. Like I've said before when talking about these chassis, it's not like the car is going to set the floor on fire with its incredibly high top speed, but there's plenty of pep here to be fun to race around a small track. Don't expect this DIY 3D printed RC chassis to be on the same level as Mini Z's or purpose-built micro drift chassis that cost hundreds or, believe it or not, can even top $1,000 for some of the ultimate high-end builds. What we have here is fun, versatile, and simple, but far from the highest performance platform in this size. Still a great base for a functional model build, and keep in mind you want to be at least somewhat careful driving around with a detailed model that you've more than likely spent hours putting together. It probably won't handle crashes too well. If you notice any problems while driving, some common issues to check for is to ensure that none of the wheels are rubbing against the body and that they can all rotate smoothly without too much resistance. The steering is obviously fully proportional, and with the included ESC and N20 motor, you get pretty good modulation at slower speeds if you want to drive around more sensibly. A perfect car to race around a living room, basement, or garage as long as the surface is smooth. You don't need a lot of room to have some fun with a car this size. This Trans Am is looking pretty good sitting on top of this FP UC1 chassis. Maybe not as brutally fast or interesting as the prior chassis was sitting on, but this here is a much more solid and proven platform, and I'm looking forward to putting these other components to use on future projects. I think the new wheels pair with the body nicely, and I'm really happy with how the side pipes can be used to hide the bottom of the chassis. Obviously far from the most amazing looking or detailed vehicle in my fleet, but that just makes it more of a beater that I'm not afraid to really fly around the track. I've got plenty more detailed and ambitious projects in the works, but hopefully to any aspiring RC model builders out there, this simple weekend project represents something that can be a great introduction to this niche of the hobby. And even with all these more ambitious builds going on, it's definitely fun to break things up with some simple projects like this. Simple to do, but also a lot of fun as well. Obviously here I just used a pre-painted body that I already had on hand, but generally a lot of the enjoyment from a project like this is going to be building and painting the body from a plastic model kit yourself. While some custom work will be required to get everything fitting and looking as good as possible, I think this project and platform will be a great place to start if you're new. I hope this detailed look at this project and all of the components used is helpful to any new builders out there. As always though, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below in the comments. As mentioned, you'll find links and info about each of the products I used for this project below in the description, and as always a huge thanks to all of our Patreon members for helping to make this content possible, as well as getting themselves access to exclusive perks such as 3D print files. Whatever you're working on, best of luck to you. I'm going to wrap up today's video right here. Huge thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.